All right, so being 6:30, we'll call the meeting of the Manchester Planning Board to order. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sarah Creighton, and this meeting is being recorded. So take a roll call vote. Roll call. Sue Felbrick here. Gordon Breaker
Here.
Chris Solomon
Here.
Sarah Creighton present. Peter Morton
Here.
and Brian Fry.
Here.
Sandy Bodmer Turner is on her way. Just one announcement. Shannon is no longer working for the town, and Gail Hunter is now taking minutes for us right now. Gail, are you on? Is she on tonight? No, we don't. Okay. She may not be. She may have to do it from the tape, but welcome, Gail. Nice to have you back. And Mark, any other updates before we jump in with the hazard mitigation plan?
No.
Okay. Nate, do you want to introduce the hazard mitigation plan? You look like you're ready to say something.
Ready to go.
Okay.
So for the record, Nate DeRozier with DPW. We're here tonight to present on actually two projects. So the first is the hazard mitigation plan update. So back in 2018, the town, working with a variety of departments, boards, and committees, completed the first hazard mitigation plan. The town is required to update that plan every 5 years. The town received a $33,000 grant from MEMA to complete this update plan. We do have a 10% town match. So the grant required us to do an RFP for procurement to select the consultant that we'd be working with. The town received 4 proposals in total, which were reviewed by the selection committee, which included Mark. Ty and Bond was deemed most advantageous proposal. They also completed the original hazard mitigation plan for the town and are the consultant that did all of the planning effort for the Sawmill Brook CZM study. So they're very familiar with, a lot of the core issues that we have in town. So, in our review, thought they were by far the most advantageous for us. We kicked off the project in about early February. We have a core team that includes town departments and members from a variety of boards and committees to help kind of guide us and steer us through the project. So with that, Kristen with Time Bond is going to do a presentation, kind of walking through where we've been and where we're going with this, all to wrap up by the end of the year with an update submission that will get sent to FEMA.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nate. Can everybody see my screen okay?
We can.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, great. Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to present on your HMP update. My name is Kristen Yankowskis, and I'm an environmental planner and project manager at Ty and Bond. And as Nate mentioned, we've been brought on to help guide the process of updating your hazard mitigation plan, or your HMP. I'll start by providing an overview of the purpose of the HMP update. We'll look at natural hazard risks and climate change, and then I'll discuss the 3 key steps of the HMP update, which is your community asset update, which is finished, the vulnerability assessment, which is in progress, and the development of new mitigation actions. And then lastly, I'll touch a little bit about public engagement strategies and options for stakeholder and public involvement. As mentioned, the town was awarded a grant through MEMA to complete the HMP update. So completing this plan is really essential for unlocking funding sources, specifically state funding sources for critical hazard mitigation projects. So why prepare an HMP? Well, completing the plan really positions the town to take advantage of hazard mitigation grants, as mentioned, as well as unlocking new funding sources. There is some state funding that gives priority to cities and towns that have completed HMPs and approved HMPs, specifically those that incorporate climate change mitigation strategies. The HMP is also just one place that compiles a list of mitigation projects that the town wants to tackle, and it prioritizes those projects to meet community goals. So those projects will be prioritized high, medium, and low, and it will kind of serve as a roadmap to guide what projects related to hazard mitigation you want to tackle first. The plan will also document historic impacts and educate the public on the risk of natural hazards to your community. So overall, your HMP is really just a tool that can be used to better prepare the town in the face of increased natural hazards, and can help aid the community in quicker recovery from natural hazard events. So this version of the HMP update, the 2025 HMP, your last one was in 2018. This one will bring your plan into consistency with the 2023 State Hazard Plan, or the SHMCAP, or I think now it's really going by the Resilient Mass Plan. And then also the new FEMA Hazard Mitigation Planning Policy Guides that just came out June of this year. So as a result of these updated guides, we'll update hazards according to the Resilient Mass Plan, we'll align community assets with the new FEMA categories, and we'll attempt to expand public outreach. Any questions so far before I move into the planning process? Okay, hearing none. So looking at big picture of the planning process, the goal here is to identify the highest natural hazard risks in your community. So those are things like coastal flooding, inland flooding, winter storm events. Then review your most vulnerable assets, and then define mitigation projects that will mitigate that risk in such a way that those assets will be protected into the future, particularly in the face of climate change. Mitigation actions can be defined as resilient when they're designed to help a site or a facility, that's what we're calling assets, adapt to the impacts of future natural hazard events. And then these projects finally will be prioritized high, medium, low in your final plan. After the plan's developed, it will go through a multi-phase review process. So I'll present at one additional planning board meeting, and that will be to present the final HMP draft, which will open a 30-day public comment period. And once that public comment period closes, we'll seek approval to send the draft to MEMA. MEMA will then review, provide comments, we'll incorporate those comments, and then we'll send it off to FEMA for their review. After FEMA approves the plan, you'll adopt the plan and receive final approval, and that will allow you to unlock funding. Any questions on the review process before we dive into natural hazards and climate change? Okay, so we'll move on to natural hazard identification that I spoke about, but first I'll give a brief overview of impacts to climate change from the state's Resilient Mass Plan. So the Massachusetts Climate Change Clearinghouse, which can be found at resilientma.org, I believe, is a place for planners, policymakers, the public to access climate data, maps, tools, and resources that are relevant to climate adaptation and resilience building in Massachusetts. Briefly, climate change projections on Resilient Mass are derived from emerging research from various sources, and those are all incorporated onto that clearinghouse. And the data from your 2025 plan will be used from that climate assessment from the Resilient Mass Plan. Overview, climate change projections show increase of number of high heat days, an increase of average annual temperature, and projections also show an increase of winter precipitation and severe weather. So taking these climate change projections into consideration will be important as we update your plan. Resilient Mass has put together some information that's specific to each region of the state that they would like us to present to the public. So Manchester by the Sea is in the North and South Shore region, and the climate outlook for this region includes warmer summer days by 36 degrees, or 3.6 degrees, sorry, increased chance of coastal flooding up to 2 times compared to the current area in 2050, increased sea surface temperatures by 5 degrees by 2070, and overall just increasing tropical cyclones by the end of the century. And there you are. So Massachusetts Climate Change Assessment ranked impacts from climate change across the state. So I'll go over the most urgent impacts per sector. There are 5 sectors: human, infrastructure, natural environment, government, and economy. So those impacts will be important to keep in mind when we develop your mitigation strategies for the update further down in the schedule. So first is human sector. Top impacts here include delays for emergency services and evacuations due to coastal storm events and inland flooding. Both of those were identified as top hazards for your town. And then additionally, impacts include air quality effects, childhood asthma, reduction of food safety and security. For infrastructure, the top impacts include damage to your utility systems due to extreme heat and storm events, and damage to coastal buildings, ports, things like that due to storm surge and high winds. For natural environment, your impacts include degradation of natural habitat, dunes, beaches, salt marsh, things of that nature due to just general warming, but also sea level rise and storm surge. For the governance sector, impacts can include increased demand for government services, but also a reduction of revenue and increased cost to maintain infrastructure and services. And then finally, looking at economy sector, the impacts could be reduction in the availability of affordable housing and reduced ability for outdoor workers to perform duties due to extreme heat. So now moving on to our first core team exercise that we've completed, and that's looking at all of the natural hazards that are presented in the state plan and ranking them in order of importance specific to your community. So these hazards typically fall into the major categories of atmospheric, which is your extreme temps, wildfires, and so on, hydrologic and geologic, like flooding, drought, and landslides, extreme weather like hurricanes, nor'easters, and other severe winter weather and tornadoes, thunderstorms, things like that. And then your non-climate related hazards, which is earthquakes. So we looked at these 15 hazards and evaluated them based off of 4 criteria: history of occurrence, hazard probability of occurrence, geographic extent, and the severity of impact. So all of those numbers relate to how probable that hazard is, how much of the town that hazard would impact, and how severe that impact would be. So the core team then reviewed them, and the top ranked natural hazards for the 2025 plan are inland flooding, dam and culvert overtopping or failure, coastal flooding and storm surge, severe winter weather such as nor'easters, and other severe weather, which is your high wind and thunderstorms. Close second, we have drought and hurricanes and coastal erosion. For your 2025 plans, we decided to not include 3 of the hazards because they are not seen as a history of occurrence in your town, and that would be tornadoes, tsunamis, and landslides and mud flows. So here's just a snapshot of the top natural hazards facing Manchester by the Sea: coastal flooding and storm surge, inland flooding, severe winter storms and nor'easters, and other severe storms. Any questions on your natural hazards or any climate change related questions before we move on to your community assets?
So that matrix we did during one of like a live meeting, we came up and ranked everything. So it was a collaborative effort where we just went through, discussed each of these items, and people could relay stories about flooding, Mother's Day storm 2006, and just kind of bouncing ideas back and forth. And really that's how we came up with these top items concerned to Manchester.
Yeah, one question. That is the extreme heat, given that the high school is not fully air conditioned. Has that been identified? Because I know that that's a.
That wasn't, and that's not something I knew about. So I think that's something we could.
I think it should be on the list.
Okay.
It's an increasing problem.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make note of that. And maybe something to consider for a mitigation action as well.
Yeah.
And Nate, can we provide these slides too? Will these be available somewhere in case someone wants to take a look at this matrix and provide feedback after the meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. We can. I think the board has them. Then we can get them posted to the DPW site.
Okay, great. Yeah, if there's anything else kind of along those lines that you're taking a look at this matrix and thinking one of these hazards should be ranked higher for whatever reason, please let me know. I can take that back to the core team and we can adjust accordingly.
I mean, it might also be worth just checking with the school district to think, because it's a regional school, but if there are others that they're concerned about, but certainly.
All right, great. Thank you for the feedback. So we've explored potential climate change impacts for the region, identified your top natural hazards. Next, we identified critical community assets. FEMA defines community assets into 4 categories, all of which are important to your character and function of your community. And these also align with the state's plan. Other than governance, those assets are going to fall mostly under that people or society category. For your plan, the community assets have been sorted under people, built environment, economy, and natural environment. People includes like social services, such as like vulnerable populations. Infrastructure includes critical facilities needed for emergency response and public health. Economy is your major employers or commercial centers. And natural environment includes areas that provide protection to reduce natural hazard impact and increase resiliency, such as your beaches, your salt marshes, things of that nature. So we looked at all of the natural or all of the critical assets from your 2018 plan, updated addresses, removed things that were no longer in service, and added new assets to come up with a final list of natural assets that fall, or critical assets that fall under these 4 categories. So digging into each one a little closer, societal assets can include areas of greater population density or populations with unique vulnerabilities that may be less able to respond or recover during the disaster. There are also some public buildings and public goods like schools, libraries, religious buildings, nursing homes, childcare facilities. Those are all going to fall under your societal assets. Your infrastructure assets are like critical municipal facilities like emergency management, police and fire, DPW, evacuation routes, bridges, main utilities, cell towers, things like that, that could be really vulnerable to hazards, but are critical for your community.
Is this a general list or is this specific to Manchester?
This is a general list. I wasn't showing the list today. We have, I think, 129 assets on the list, which will be shown on an online GIS dashboard at the end of this planning process. So you'll be able to go on to the dashboard, see all of your 129 critical assets, see where they overlap with current floodplains and projected flooding with MCFRM. So that will all be available for the public at the end of the planning process. But this right now is just giving you a general idea of what kind of assets fall under each of these categories. So yeah, economy, we don't have a ton of economic assets in Manchester. These are mostly, major employers or also like commercial centers that might support the local economy, where, if those commercial centers were lost or inoperable during a natural hazard event, it would have a severe impact on the community and its ability to recover from disaster. And then your last category is your environmental assets. This is your rivers, your lakes, wetlands, floodplains, beaches, conservation areas, wildlife management areas, things like that that strengthen the community, but often provide direct resilience. Any questions on the natural assets and how those were developed before I briefly get into the vulnerability assessment? The natural assets selection is where we're at in the plan, so that we've completed all of that and we are moving on to the vulnerability assessment, which is in the process of being completed. Okay, Nate, anything to add on the community asset list selection?
No, I don't think so. I think, those are pretty comprehensive look through, adding to the assets that were, predominantly identified in the initial outset. So I think it's still good for people to go on the website, look, because there's always things like even going through, just looking, it's like you forget about some of the assets that you have in your community. So the more people that can look at it, so that's, I think, why why I wanted to present the general list, because there's always like, oh, a little thing, you know, you kind of forget about the daycare that's right behind the wastewater plant. It's not something people always think about. So it's just those little things that, you know, are kind of tucked away that we want to identify.
Is there an opportunity to sort of talk about the collective personal property? I mean, it's all public assets, but there's a lot of personal property and, you know, structures and boats and all those kinds of things, which are highly vulnerable.
I think when we're thinking about the assets that we want to include in the list, it's those that are critical to the recovery or the resiliency of your community. So often that does not include private lands or private property, but there could be some exceptions depending on what the function of that asset is in relation to natural hazards and the ability for your community to bounce back from natural hazard events. So if you have something particular in mind, definitely reach out to Nate or I, and we can see if that
Well,
fits.
just thinking about North Carolina, where many homes were flooded, you know, in addition to the daycares and the electric utilities and other things, it seems like the destruction of property as well as the community's ability to provide service to is a huge vulnerability. People lose their homes are
Right, and I think that effort focuses more on notifications. You know, those are, you know, I don't want to say it this way, but you know, if someone loses a home, it's not impacting the wider community. If we lose the wastewater plant,
right.
you know, that's a much more substantial impact. So I think it's, you know, looking at the things that really,
Public
that drive the community and allow us to recover.
And we can evaluate those areas of vulnerability specifically as it relates to public areas in the mitigation actions. You know, is there an identified action in an area that's really prone to flooding? Is there a project that can be outlined in your plan that increases the resiliency of that area without necessarily having it be identified as a critical asset? So that those kind of concerns can still be baked into the plan once we get to the mitigation actions.
There's like, oh, there'll be a lot of overlap with the CVAP, the Coastal Vulnerability Action Plan. So those are the things we identified on the harbor, you know, a tide gate, or those things that flood proof, you know, the downtown, this area of town to prevent, you know, some of those, that inland or coastal flooding, sea level rise.
Right. Okay, ready to move on to vulnerability assessment. So the vulnerability assessment, and this is kind of a good segue, this looks at where and to what degree impacts are experienced by people, places, and infrastructure in general. So the vulnerability assessment looks at two things: townwide impacts, but then also asset-specific impacts. So the townwide impacts are evaluated using a tool called HAZUS, and this identifies the vulnerability of earthquakes and hurricanes townwide. And then second part of the vulnerability assessment is looking at your identified community assets. And we'll look at how those are overlaid with the MCFRM data and then also floodplain data to determine vulnerability to coastal and inland flooding. And then we'll also look at a list of potential future development and see what vulnerability to certain hazards they have, so that when those future developments are being planned, we can have the vulnerability in mind. So the main thing that I really want to talk about today is the mitigation strategy, because this is kind of the meat of your plan. The process starts by looking at all the projects and programs that are currently in place that provide hazard mitigation. Next, we review all of the past mitigation actions, all of the past projects, goals, and programs that were outlined in your 2018 plan. We'll go through each one and say, has this been completed? Great, check off the box. Should this be removed? It's no longer applicable. Is it in process or is it in progress, and move it into the new plan? Or has it not been started yet, but we still want to have it in the 2025 plan? And then based on the new goals and objectives, we will develop a list of new projects and complete a cost benefit for those mitigation projects. And then we'll prioritize those projects from high, medium, and low, and then develop a strategy to adopt and implement those projects. So really, we're looking at 6 main categories of mitigation actions: prevention, property protection, public education, natural resource protection, structural projects, and emergency service protections. Most of our actions should fall under these 6 categories, which will line the projects up well to be funded by many different sources, state and federal. Oh, excuse me. Here are some examples of, of mitigation actions. These are not necessarily in your plan. These are just general examples. You can see they range widely from tree removal along critical roads to habitat restoration, or replacing undersized culverts. And this is really going to be the longest process for our core team, looking at past mitigation actions and developing new actions. And this is also the area of the plan that I'm hoping for the most public engagement, because there are some things that members of the core team might not know about. Like, for example, the AC in the high school is something that wasn't brought up in any of our core team meetings yet. So as a member of the planning board, or even as a member of the public, we'll present these mitigation actions and ensure that everything is captured and there aren't any projects that relate to hazard mitigation that should be included. And then once these mitigation actions are established, it will provide the community with a list of projects that will help mitigate the risk of natural hazards, specifically your top natural hazards. And then these projects can be funded by various state sources, including Community One Stop, culvert replacement. MVP action grants are a big one for hazard mitigation actions, MEMA grants, and more. I had a slide for federal sources as well, but that's a little bit in flux. So that might be more dependent on the time when these actions actually get completed. So for now, I'm just presenting some state sources. Any questions with mitigation actions before I move on to my last piece, which is public engagement opportunities?
Yeah, I have one, and that is can you give us some examples of things that would fall into the planning board's domain?
So the planning board, that we've had things in previous hazard mitigation actions that might be adjustments to your zoning or adjustments to subdivision bylaws. Things of that nature can also be considered hazard mitigation actions. It doesn't have to just be like infrastructure projects.
Right. So specifically, what kinds of zoning adjustments?
So something like zoning overlay districts. I don't know if you have your floodplain bylaw up to date, and if you have like a floodplain manager identified, somebody in town that's in charge of that floodplain bylaw. There are some communities that haven't really identified that specific person yet. In subdivision, it could be including more things for reduction of impervious area, or the inclusion of, say, landscaping islands in a cul-de-sac that can help with flooding and reduce impervious area. Like small things like that could all be included as actions. And also things that maybe not necessarily planning related, but things that are, I know this community is incredibly vulnerable to flooding. And can we identify why this specific neighborhood is always flooding? That may be something the core team isn't thinking about, but as just a general member of your community, you might have that in mind, and we can incorporate that into the plan.
I have a question. So, Kirsten, you mentioned early on that drought and high winds might be a result of climate change. And I'm wondering if maybe wildfires might be considered as a potential hazard to this community, given that so much of our land is covered with trees.
Yeah, let's go back and see what we did for wildfires. So wildfires, we did identify that there is a probability of occurrence, but we did rank it as a 3 on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the highest vulnerability and 5 being the lowest vulnerability. So it kind of landed a little bit in the middle.
Okay, that's fair.
But yes, it was identified.
What are you thinking, Chris?
I'm thinking I can't read it.
Not know why. Should it be higher than your mind?
No, I don't think so.
I'll make a note that it was brought up anyway.
Fire chief was on that meeting where we went to those, and he was generally in agreement with where we had it ranked. You know, he thinks that with their current plan and preparedness, that it really shouldn't be ranked, you know, over some of the other higher priority items.
Any other questions? Okay, finally, I'd like to just briefly discuss public involvement. FEMA defines involvement, participation, and opportunity to be involved to promote meaningful engagement as a key part of their approval of the plan. So they really encourage participation from a broad range of stakeholders like local and regional agencies, neighboring communities, business reps, nonprofits, community-based organizations, things like that. I will work with the core team to develop a list of stakeholders that can take part of the planning process. But it can really be anyone in your community. It could be, you know, Council on Aging, Housing Authority, if there's any food banks or religious services, Nature Conservancy, historic preservation groups, anything of that nature. We really encourage everyone to be involved in this process. So if anyone would like to be included in a stakeholder group workshop, please let Nate or I know, or if you can think of any group in particular that would be great to involve in this process as we move forward, specifically developing those mitigation actions, please let us know and we can add them to a stakeholder list. We're planning on hosting one group workshop of stakeholders so we can reach a little bit beyond just the core team. Yeah, we want to establish a robust public engagement process so that we can hear from a variety of stakeholders who understand Manchester by the Sea's strengths and vulnerability. So this public outreach can really help shine light on the connection between hazards, your ongoing planning, your past planning, but really just asking for public input to understand which mitigation action should be prioritized, what should be included in the plan. And the result of this kind of public engagement is a plan that is approved by both MEMA and FEMA and will help you unlock funding opportunities for projects. Any questions on public engagement before I finish off with a slide of what's next? All right, so next we'll work to complete the rest of the plan by developing mitigation actions. We'll draft a plan, and then I'll present at one other public meeting to open up that 30-day public comment period. We'll take all of those public comments, incorporate them in the plan as necessary, and then that plan will be sent off to MEMA. They'll review, provide suggestions, we'll incorporate those, we'll send it off to FEMA, and then finally you'll adopt and finalize the plan.
Great.
Any other general questions or
I do have a
comments?
question here. What is the time frame for all this? All sounds very ambitious.
So we're hoping to wrap up by the end of the year. We are about, I would say, 50% through the process. But I think by December, we'll be able to send the project or the plan into MEMA. The review timelines for MEMA and FEMA are kind of up in the air. It's not like they have 30 days to review. They can kind of take their time. MEMA has been pretty quick. FEMA FEMA, we're not really sure. That's really kind of in flux at the moment. So we don't have a great timeline of when the plan will be adopted because that really depends on MEMA and FEMA review. But we think we'll be able to get a final draft to MEMA by the end of the year.
And who adopts the plan for the town?
So the select board will adopt the plan.
When do you think, the period of most intense public engagement will occur?
That will be during the mitigation action development, which will be sometime, I am thinking late fall.
So October, November?
I'd say October, November timeframe, yeah. And then also again, public engagement, once that 30-day comment period opens, that can be anyone in the community can take a look at the draft plan and provide comments.
And then I have a question for you, because specifically, it sounds great. You're gonna define and prioritize these events and what needs to happen, correct? There's the event itself, and then there's a remedy, what you need to do to respond to that. Where does it go from here as far as the town and funding whatever the priority is?
So I think that, you know, we develop the plan and then we work with, you know, the town leaders to come up with, you know, develop it and bring it into our capital plan. You know, we have all the various demands, so we have to figure out how they work in, you know, with the select board, town administrator, DPW, and all the various departments.
So, you'll take that priority list of what you think needs to be done first, if you will. And then from there, take it on for the budgeting and financial.
Exactly, yeah. Bring it into all the other lists that we have,
Yeah,
you know,
there-
priorities, and just see how they come together and how we can fund things.
Kristen, I have a question, from the state policy perspective, and there was just an article in the New York Times about flood management, and they were arguing that retreat of property, you know, retreat from the ocean is a strategy. How many of these plans are actually embracing that as a strategy on any kind of scale?
I would say not many of the plans are looking at retreat as a mitigation action. I think most people are looking at protection or adaptation instead of managed retreat. And I think a reason could be that the state hasn't really established great regulations or standards for retreat yet. I know there are some things in progress. I think from MEMA and other agencies, but because we don't really have robust regulations around that yet, I'm not seeing a lot of communities include retreat in their plans.
And then a similar but different question, that is, I know that the state very much wants to see natural buffers and natural flood, but in reality, when you have impervious surfaces or personal property right up against those areas that are flooding, already built out, are people, and is this plan allowing hardening on certain properties?
Yeah, especially the properties that already have gray infrastructure there. If you have a seawall or something of that nature, I'd say most of the coastal communities that are working in are creating mitigation actions to improve upon those structures, not remove them or propose some kind of natural buffer.
Okay, and one other related question, because I'm on the harbor management plan, there's a lot of overlap here. We were talking about a uniform permitting and review process, and even potentially a uniform seawall height across the area. Is that something that anybody has been able to tackle? I know it's not just a local jurisdiction.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I would have to ask around for that.
Because if everybody could do the same thing and make it easier to go through the hoops, and
Right.
also not one person builds something much higher than everybody else's, which pushes the water downstream.
So the CVAP kind of tackled that, and they basically set the, you know, critical flood elevation that we would need to harden to is elevation 13.
Okay.
So for like reference, the town hall parking lot is about elevation 10.
Mhm.
So, you know, the fire department, behind the fire department at the, along the central pond, that's about elevation 8. So when we elevated, the generator at the fire department that's new, there's a new giant concrete pad
Mhm.
that we got funding, from CZM. It's 5 feet off the ground to meet that elevation 13. It looks crazy right now, but might not in the future.
All right, any other questions? Great, thank you very much, Nate and Kristen.
Thank
Thank you very much. Yep.
Look forward to hearing more.
Here's
Um,
some contact info if you think of a question or would like to be involved in public engagement. But yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Great, thank you. Okay. What time's the public hearing?
Posted at 6:30. You wanna skip over?
Well, Nate's here, so.
Yeah.
We have 2 things scheduled at the same time, so apologize to people waiting. So Nate, why don't you jump into Sweeney Park
Yeah, we can make this.
update?
It'll be quick. So I think the goal for tonight, give a little background where we've been with the Sweeney Park project, and I think really we need to decide where we're gonna go with this project. So we have Brandon Kunkel and Jessica Lee with Weston and Sampson, who are the design consultants. They previously completed the Parks and Rec Field Master Plan, and then were the design consultants for the Pine Street Field. Our original design objectives for the Sweeney Field were to increase the amount of playing time that we can have. We're going to do that by going to a turf field, and the other primary objectives were getting a full-size field that didn't have overlap. So after we did the survey, we ran into, found quite a number of constraints that really limit what we can do there. Turn it over to Brandon. I don't want to do too much of their presentation. And Jessica.
No, Nate, you're doing a great job. Thanks very much. But great to be here all tonight. Thanks for having us. In reality, I don't think we'll be too long. I'm going to hand it over to Jessica. She's been the one doing majority of the studies and the concepts that she's going to be sharing this evening and gathering the data. So just in the essence of time, I'm going to hand it over to Jessica and chime in as needed.
All right, Jessica, I need to make you a co-host. You gave the wrong person. Okay, you should be able to share.
You're muted, Jessica.
We can see your screen.
But not you.
Oh, but we can't hear you. No, you have your mic on some other setting. Brandon, maybe you can jump in if she can't.
Why don't I go ahead and jump in, Jessica, if you can hear, then just flip the slide. So we'll just go ahead, jump to the next slide. Jesus. Sorry about that, folks. All right, so just a little bit of context. Here's where Sweeney sits within the greater landscape of Manchester by the Sea. It's relatively coastal, but still a bit inland. One thing I do want to point out, and if you're familiar with Sweeney Park at all, You have the Brickyard Pond, but really it's the greater wetland area, which would be planned southeast, just across the aqueduct, the purple line there. And then obviously hydraulically high groundwater. So I guess just to keep things moving, Jessica, next slide. This is out of the athletic field master plan we did in 2020 for you folks. These are just the average annual permitted hours for Sweeney. You can see that they have 645 hours for baseball and softball 693, and the rectangular field gets 553. So just to put that a bit in context, on average, you want to have about 450 to 550 use hours per year for a natural grass. As Nate mentioned at the top of the presentation, historically, we've been considering synthetic turf. We'll talk a bit more about that in a bit, but that's only to overcome the use hours. So already we're seeing that, combined, these hours are way over what would be sustainable for a natural grass field. So next slide.
That doesn't count all the limited time in the spring and fall when it's just wet because it's ground
Correct.
saturation.
Correct. Some of the existing conditions, you can see there's topography, quite a bit of topography on the left. You can see the stream and the intermittent stream, and then also coming off of the ponds and the pedestrian access that links the fields themselves to the now pickleball court area, formerly a skate spot. So you'll note, just in general, we're surrounded on marshy, wet land on three sides. Next slide. We did run, and we've had our wetland scientists out there. You can see a little bit more once you dig a little bit deeper into the topography. We got a stream bank, an intermittent stream bank, and a bordering vegetated wetland. So those are all of our environmental constraints. Once you start doing the offsets and the setbacks and the no-touch zones, we become very limited to what we can do, and we can talk more about that. Next slide. We've been out there to observe test pits. You can see here, it doesn't take long before we are encountering groundwater. As I mentioned, we have a high water table a few slides ago, but we've done extensive testing. So, there's no real surprises at this point in time. Next slide.
Those test pits were done just about on the coldest day in January that year. It was like 5 degrees out. Our DPW guys got some props that day.
They were very excited.
Yeah.
We've also done some boring, so we have a good sense of the soils below. It's clay, so that, essentially we're going to have trouble long-term with infiltration and getting rid of the water. Again, we have a lot of constraints not going in our favor. So next slide. But we did look at getting in a full-size field and renovating both the softball and the baseball field. We've adjusted the orientations to be more accommodating of the solar glare, particularly for the softball and the baseball. But this is once you start getting really into the constraints related to the adjacent wetlands, what we're really left with and limited with. But we are, concerned about a wet corner. If Jessica, you could highlight that with your cursor. And then there is still a bit of overlap when it comes to the rectangular field versus the infields of both the softball and baseball fields. Next slide. There's a slightly different configuration where again, looking at the solar orientation, and you can see there's not much difference between the two, but that's just really as a result of the constraints that we're dealing with. Next slide. So once you start overlaying sort of the constraints and the setbacks, you can see there really isn't much that we can do. I mean, not to say we can't do anything. There are existing fields there. They're built and they're functioning. The intent is to make them function at a higher level, not necessarily so that they dry out faster and are usable for longer periods of the year. But you can see there's quite a bit of setbacks and overlap from an environmental perspective. Next slide.
So it's not only just the fields, it's the parking. We want to, I think parking at those fields has long been a issue, especially with when it's wet out. The backhole end is pretty much a giant puddle. The existing drainage there, along with a lot of other parts of town, is old corrugated metal that just has collapsed, filled over the years. We've tried numerous times to rectify it, but it's too far gone. So it really needs a full replacement and new grading, and ideally we're paving that that parking lot to be able to accommodate parking in the entire area for the entirety of the year. So really maximize our parking, because you go there a lot of times and there's just not there's a lack of parking, especially now with pickleball being so popular.
Thanks for that, Nate. One thing I did want to point out is, we know we will be working within the wetlands and the environmental resource areas. We do anticipate having to do replication. The intent of the replication is actually to create some higher functioning wetland areas in return. We're not looking to expand the overall footprint of the already, we'll say, developed field areas. We're going to work within the existing envelope. We just want to make it more efficient and provide better drainage, subsurface drainage, and to Nate's point, be able to provide accessible parking from just not necessarily a handicapped perspective, but just functionality. If it's underwater parts of the year, then let's see if we can't get it to drain after those storm events at a quicker rate. The intent is just to get as much of the use out of these fields as we can, just by amending soils and putting in subsurface drainage, potentially synthetic turf. I know there's still a lot of conversations to be had. This is just sort of where we're at. We wanted to make sure we're going in open eyes, particularly related to the environmental resource areas. We want to protect those to the greatest extent possible. The intent is, the intent is not to fill, only because we really can't. We want to work within the existing envelope again. So next slide. And it's hard to read this text, so I apologize in advance. Looking at some of the total impact areas, and I'm not going to read every number. We're happy to share this after the fact with Nate, and he can distribute it amongst you folks. But you can see we are really trying to limit the actual impact areas and then mitigate where we can and what makes the most sense. You guys are really our first stop, technically our second stop. We have met with the recreation board, but we still do have to meet with Conservation Commission, before, you know, we want to get all the buy-in, to the greatest extent possible, to make sure that, you know, we have a project that can move forward and can get permitted. Next slide. I think we're just about done.
But I think tonight, you know, Parks and Rec, you know, their objectives, like I said earlier, are full-size field and have it playable more. But as a town perspective, what should,
Full-size baseball,
full-size soccer, rectangular.
full-size soccer field.
Yeah, that fits in. Going along with the softball field, which is the far right one, which we'd be modifying, and then the Little League field, which is the inside, which currently really isn't in the scope to, you know, do the infield, the dugouts. You know, so really right now, the scope has been to get playable fields with the full-size soccer field and update the parking lot. I guess our question is, you know, do we want to take this a step further? What is the, you know, should the town's goal be? Do we want to add bathrooms? Do we want to do the concession stand? Do we want to, you know, looking for input, you know, before we take the next step? You know, we've kind of identified all of our constraints that we know about now. But what's the vision, the broader vision for the park?
Are you asking that question?
Yeah. We try, looking for feedback.
I just see the challenges. I have 2 sons that played on those fields, and we all probably in them. And that is a challenging side. And looking at that layout with a full-size soccer field on that.
Right.
That is a challenge here without doing extensive work, which I'm not
Right.
really allowed to do because of the proximity of the wetlands so close by.
Right, so we basically, that's the, you know, we have to stay within the footprint, we can't alter the grade, we can just improve the subsurface, you know, soils and add, you know, drainage.
Aren't you in fact venturing into the wetlands with that plan?
It's all within the existing footprint, so we are currently, and so that's why we, you know, we've had kind of preliminary talks with the Conservation Commission. But it would still need to go to them in this current, you know, configuration. All working, not expanding. You know, our original hope was to expand, so we didn't have to overlap, you know, the outfield, the fields onto the outfields of each of the respective. And then, you know, like, as we got into it, we saw that wasn't gonna be remotely possible, and that the wetlands are actually already on the field. So, and I guess the other avenue is it a project we still want to pursue?
So Nate, what is the alternative?
That's a good question.
Business as usual.
I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah,
we
business as
need
usual.
to hear from Parks and Rec
Yeah.
to understand their goals and what alternatives they've already considered and dismissed. Before we can really, I mean, at least for me, before I can really evaluate, is this a road, is this the only road we can go down?
Yeah, I mean,
Is anyone from Parks and Rec?
I think Muffin, I thought I saw Muffin on, you know, from our facilities master plan. You know, there's not a currently available town-owned land large enough to accommodate new fields. When we did the Pine Street field, ideally, we would have gone bigger and made a field that could accommodate more people, more programs, but that was our only really undeveloped spot in town that we could place a new field on. So I think this is, you know, going the turf route was the ideal, you know, that was gonna get our biggest bang for the buck on an existing, you know, site. Outside of that, you know, we don't currently have anything. You know, if there are things in the future,
This is grass, natural grass?
yeah,
Yeah, don't you remember? It's natural mud.
No, I know it is now, but it's the plan to be natural grass,
No.
not turf.
correct. We could not convert to turf because of having to maintain grade in the wetlands.
And there's been a demonstrated need for another full-size soccer field.
Yeah, Cheryl or, yeah, Muffin, you want?
By the way, I coach there, coaching tomorrow night, Little League, and the All-Star team. So we'll be out at Sweeney Field tomorrow night for practice.
wearing your boots.
Yeah, so this is Muffin Driscoll and I'm the chair of Parks and Rec. So Susan, to your question about, how does Parks and Rec feel about this? This is the reason we feel strongly about putting this plan forward to all the appropriate boards. Because the committee would like to see some updating done to Sweeney Park. To answer, is this, necessary for the continued use of the space? Yes, it is. We call it a soccer field, though the high school will use that for middle school field hockey, middle school soccer, should that program return. JV soccer practices down there. And there's been times when a lacrosse team has practiced there. So there is a need for the field to be rebuilt so that it has a better opportunity to drain. We all know it doesn't drain now. And it takes many, many, many man hours and labor to get, just as a perfect example, this past spring, the softball field, to get that field playable with all the rain. So rebuilding within the footprints that are already there and creating drainage in 2025 versus drainage in 1965 and 70, we're hoping would make enough of a difference down there. So that's the perspective of the Parks and Rec.
That's really helpful. I think as this goes forward, I can imagine hearing some really out of the box ideas from residents of the town. For example, is there the availability for Manchester to share with other towns or the college facilities? Or I'm just,
Right.
Is this the only route?
Right.
I guess.
Right. Yep. Nope. You're absolutely right. The reason Parks and Rec is tackling it is because we've worked at Tux Point, we've worked at the beach, we've worked at Masconomo Park. It's time for Sweeney Park to at least be put in front of the community with a plan.
So Muffin, hi, it's Peter Moore. Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
If it is improved, do you expect the hours that are listed in that table to increase too?
Peter, I would think so, because it would become an available field even the day after it's rained.
Right.
So I do.
Yeah. And Nate, if I could just ask you from a drainage perspective, Muffin's comment about modernizing the drainage. What's your thought on the immediate impact of that?
Yeah, I mean, so the project would basically entail pulling out a lot of the bad soils that you can see, the clay, and putting in essentially an under drain system that channels, when it does rain, goes down through this new good soils, granular materials, gets into a basically collection system that runs under the field. Then that gets, pulled into a drainage system that ties into the town's drainage system.
And have you had, is it premature to ask if you've had any estimates on what something like that would cost?
So, I mean, we have very high level, it's in the 1 to 2 million range. So, that's kind of where we get into the, if we're going to go to that extent, do we want to make it a more comprehensive project? It's really, what is the vision that we see for this park? How can we best sell it to the community to support it? Will they support it as is, just a drainage improvement project? Or would they want to see bathrooms, concession stands, or whatever, else that you think, folks might want to see in a new park or an updated park?
So
I think that's question 1 and question 2.
Yeah.
They are not
Yeah.
linked.
So I think that the need has been documented for 25 years. The study has been repeated in varying forms for 25 years. So I think I would sell it as a deferred maintenance in a lot of ways, and modernizing of the athletic portion. Personally, as to whether or not, it doesn't seem to me that it has broad value as a park for the general non high school age and younger, athlete. So I'm not sure it's the same, it's really not the same kind of park as Tux Point or Mascanoma Park in my book, for those other questions about other amenities. But I think that's a question for the select board and the capital plan rather than for us. That's sort of my feeling. But I would see it as an asset we currently have that doesn't work very well and needs to be repaired. And from the field's perspective, that seems to me to be documented for 3 decades. So, and the wetland's been there for 3 decades. More. So I don't know, that's my view. I don't think we have the ability to weigh in on the rest of it.
The only other question I would have is whether it may make more sense to invest in other fields and make them usable for more hours to make up the difference.
I think that study's been done though. There's not.
Done and redone,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's been.
So, for example, introducing lights at Coach Field or something. Play on those
That
more
would be
hours.
one suggestion.
That would be Sarah's claim to fame.
Tried that, we got permission, and then,
But you could revisit that.
I think it's great. I think it's great the fact that we need more fields so kids can participate more. I think that's great. Considering where we were 15 years ago to where we are now, it's amazing the differences that we have. But obviously, this one needs to be addressed at some level. And so Nate, I have to ask a question. It's like burning in my head here, right there. Is there a chance to reduce the size of the field and make it maybe not quite so soccer to a softball and baseball field?
Reducing the soccer field size, I think.
By maybe eliminating one of the program elements you've got on there and do a really good job on what you have left.
I think that's where we run into not having the programming elsewhere to accommodate those.
Right.
So that's the need for having all of those there.
Thinking like I think, it needs to be a question that needs to be answered first, not first, but sometime in the decision tree. I'd love to see all that happen. It looks terrific the way you propose it. But having been there for years and years and years, I just find it challenging. Maybe better to do one thing very well rather than 3 things not quite so good. But in any case, that's questions to be addressed.
Right, I think we should probably move on because we do have a public hearing that's posted for 6:30. Any other pressing questions or input for Nate? We certainly can continue to think about this. You can give us the slides and any specific questions you want us to revisit. That would be great.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nate.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Leslie Sampson. At this point, I'm gonna turn it over to Sue.
What's the best way to do it?
I think Mark can just see if there's any questions.
Mark can become the host.
Mark can, yeah, we're,
Okay, that'd be
if
great.
there's anybody, is Susan St. Pierre gonna be presenting?
Yes,
Okay.
yep. I think
Make
she's
her come
there,
in.
or maybe.
I need to recuse myself for this, so I'm gonna step out. You know,
You already made her a co-host, so
no, I think you're fine.
I don't.
Good, okay.
Yeah.
So, since Sarah needs to recuse herself, I'm going to attempt to conduct the special permit application portion of tonight's meeting. So first order of business is to take a motion to open the public hearing to consider a special permit application submitted by Peter and Catherine Creighton for a seawall reconstruction replacement and associated improvements project at 6 Ashland Avenue. Can I have that motion?
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
Peter and Chris, okay. Now, we'll call vote to, pass the motion to open the hearing. Sandy, Bob Turner,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Peter Morton,
Yes.
Chris Olney,
Yes,
Gordon Brewster.
Yes.
And I vote yes. All right. Who would like to begin the presentation on behalf of the applicants?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Susan St. Pierre.
Great.
And I'm helping the Creightons get the permits that they need for this project. So I have a PowerPoint presentation. Can I share my screen with you?
Mark, are you ready to do that?
Yeah, if you already made you a co-host, so yes,
Okay. Let's see if this,
you should be able to do so.
And Susan did the work for Manchester and Crockers and others you might have remembered before you a little while ago, independent consultant. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Peter Creighton. I was just saying that Susan has done work and before you, I think, for other projects here in town.
Thank you.
Okay, we can see your slides.
oh, great. Okay. So the Manchester by the Sea zoning bylaw has a provision that requires anyone who's proposing work seaward of mean high water to get a special permit. So that's why we're here tonight, because the Creightons need to improve their seawall, as you'll see as we move through the slides. So this is the property here at 6 Ashland Ave. It's about 1/2 acre, and here's the parcel map to the right. It's a single-family residence, and it has a studio outbuilding along the water side. This is the provision of the zoning ordinance that triggers the need to apply for a special permit. It's because we also need a Chapter 91 license for this work. So the text of your zoning bylaw says that any project below mean high water that also requires a Chapter 91 license needs to secure a special permit. Now, typically, in most communities, what you do when you apply for a Chapter 91 license is you submit the application to the planning board, and then they can either comment on it or not comment on it. But in Manchester, it's a little different because you require a special permit. So these are photos of the site, so you can see that the seawall is in a state of disrepair. This is that little outbuilding I was talking about, the studio building, and this is their lawn. The Manchester Marine properties to the left of that photograph. And then they have an existing gangway, which has already been previously approved by DEP. And you can see the seawall on the other side of the gangway is also having some deterioration issues. This is the property to the left of the gangway. The seawall is really, it's really dangerous, actually. And this is closer to the Manchester Marine property. So this is an existing conditions. I had to cut the plan in half because the lot is so linear. But this is the home here, the dwelling, the main single family dwelling. They have a patio in this location. There's lawn areas. There's a driveway to the top of the screen. There's a lawn, landscaped areas all around, beautiful landscaped areas. The image below shows the existing studio. There's also a flood zone on the property, which is to the rear of the studio, to the landward side of the studio, which is elevation 10. This is the seawall that we're talking about that needs repair, the location of the seawall. This is the gangway and floating dock system that was previously approved. There's also, importantly, a sewer easement and a sewer line that goes through the property. And it kind of goes under this big tree here. And then there's a manhole in this location here, getting closer to the Manchester Marine parcel. So the work that we're proposing to do below mean high water is to reconstruct about 95 linear feet of the seawall. And because some of it has fallen in, we're going to be reconstructing it, and we'll be increasing the height anywhere from 1 foot to 3.5 above existing conditions, because it's buried in the state of collapse. There's a little area, I should have pointed it out. There's a little, let's see, right here, this area here, right adjoining the property next door. It must have been an old ramp, an old boat ramp. So there's about a 5-foot section in there that we're gonna be adding a 12-inch high capstone on. The wall's in pretty good shape. But the rest of it, the rest of the 95 feet needs a lot of work. So we'll be using new kind of cut stones, the existing stones. We're gonna have to found the wall on crushed stone subbase for proper drainage with the filter fabric. In front of the existing wall, we'll be putting some shoring support so that the wall won't collapse during excavation and reconstruction. And then on the land side, even though that's landward of mean high water, we'll be regrading to bring the lawn up to about a foot below the grade of the top of the wall. And then we'll be filling that and placing loam seed and native plantings. Here is the proposed work. So during construction, I have a screen that's going to show it closer up. But during construction vehicles will come through this area here. There's not going to be a lot. Just to access the site, there's a tree or two that might have to be removed, but they will be replaced. And that's how they'll get access to the site. And this cross-hatched area is where the regrading on the project on the lawn will occur. Here's a close-up of that area. So the 5 feet is in this location here next to that ramp. So that'll just be a 1-foot high capstone placed there. And then this is the 90 feet of wall that'll be reconstructed and brought up to elevation 7. And the lawn behind it will be elevation 8. We have to protect the sewer line, and the engineers have been in contact with the DPW, so they're aware of that work. We have to accommodate the existing gangway because right now it's at a lower grade, so there'll be some modifications in that area to accommodate that. Based on our meetings with the Conservation Commission, we're providing pretty lot of landscaping here with native salt tolerant, drought tolerant species in this location here. This is a section view. So you can see the crushed stone that we'll be placing under and behind the wall. This is the shoring, the temporary shoring that'll be put there before excavation starts. And this is basically what the wall will look like, which it previously looked like, except it might not have been quite as high. And then we're going to have a 1-foot capstone on top of that. So the lawn will be at elevation 7 and the top of the capstone will be at elevation 8. Wherever excavated materials are temporarily stockpiled, we'll have erosion control silt sock around those, just to make sure that no erosion or any materials go into the harbor. Let's see. I think that's about it. And then I included this information in the special permit application. If you want me to walk through it, I can, but it just goes through each provision of your zoning ordinance for what you need to demonstrate to get a special permit. And then the next page is performance standards of section 6.3 of the bylaw. So I think, basically because it's a residential use already, we're not proposing any lighting, we're not proposing any roads, we're not proposing any traffic, we're not changing the utilities. We're pretty much restoring the seawall, increasing the height a little bit, anywhere from 1 to 3.5 feet, I think I said. The impacts on the natural environment actually are going to be positive because right now the seawall is collapsing into the coastal beach. Also, improving the seawall is going to help with storm damage to the wall and also to the land behind it, and provide a better protection from storm-driven waves for the property. And so that's those. And then no lighting. The noise will only happen during construction. It will be minimal. A lot of the work is going to be done by hand in terms of dismantling the existing stones and then placing them back in. Minor site grading, but actually a lot of that type of work is outside of mean high water, but we wanted to mention the whole project. So anyhow, I think it meets with the standards outlined in your zoning bylaw, and we're hoping that you can approve the project. I think that was it. Oh, also the permits that we were required to get are the Manchester Conservation Commission, and the engineering company went before the commission in December and received an order of conditions. We need a special permit from the planning board. for all the reasons I just described. And we need a Chapter 91 license from the state. And before they can issue that, they're ready to issue, but before they can issue it, they need to, the planning board has to sign off. There's a specific form that has to be signed. And the building inspector has to sign a zoning form, and neither of those can be signed until we get through the special permit process. And then we also have an Army Corps permit, but actually all that involves is notifying them on a form that they provide. So I think that we're hoping to start the work in the fall. I think that's it, unless, I don't know if Peter has anything that he wants to add.
But not particularly. We just have the wall really is a couple feet off the mud, and some of it was paved curbstones, and I've been putting rebar in for years, trying to hold them in place, and they just keep falling in. We have two sons, an 8-year-old and 10-year-old, and they love to go down and collect sea glass, and they're finding that the stones are caving in on them, and I just hate to have someone down there, a friend, and have one of the remaining stones come down and, you know, land on toes. And so my wife and I said, let's, you know, just repair the wall. We're not trying to keep the water out. The water still goes behind the wall. It's 8 feet, will be the top, and still comes around and floods the lawn and back, which is fine, but we're just trying to get an even surface that's safer for everyone and will last moving forward.
And also, Peter, I believe you've talked to several of your neighbors and they're all in support of the project.
We did, yes, yep. Up and down the street, Manchester Marine and McFadden's and Hans and others, and said they'd be glad to come or support whatever we're doing. Their walls are quite high. They have walls that come up and go up at a much higher elevation than ours. So ours is just it's a pretty small wall.
Anybody have any questions?
I have one regarding the materials. I know that you sort of ran through this and it is in your project description, but can you just go through reusing the materials that are there and what materials you're adding and sort of give us a visual, I guess?
Okay, so this cross section shows the crushed stone that will be put underneath the wall. So here's the mud line here. So part of the wall currently and in the future will be below the mud line. And so there'll be crushed stone beneath it and there'll be crushed stone behind it, and that will help with storm drainage and actually drainage of seawater coming in. So that all is going to help in terms of structural improvement and also drainage, stormwater drainage. So then there are existing stones. So all these existing stones, you can't, I mean, this isn't a good graphic to show them all, but they'll be removed and replaced within the existing footprint of the existing wall. And then supplemental stone that looks just like that stone will be brought in to increase the height, as I described. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
We're trying to reuse all the existing stone. There's
Yeah, they're going to
trying to
reuse
bring in
everything.
things, just
Yeah.
taking, reorganizing to the best we can.
So I have a question, and I'm just curious more than anything. Is you said that the height of this will be at the 8-foot level, and I think you said that studio is at the 10-foot level.
Yeah, so flood water, you know, during coastal storm flood, water will still go over the wall.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Up on
Yeah.
pilings.
Oh, okay.
So you can look over your shoulder and the water just goes right underneath the studio.
Right. So when you have a tidal surge like that in a storm, how high has the water gone in the bath? I'm just curious, is there a consideration of building it higher? Is that even?
Yeah, I don't think we'd ever be able to keep the water out just because the neighbor's property, Manchester Marine, it would come in on that side. Or the boat ramp on the McFadden's side, they have a boat ramp that comes up that's on their property. So while we have a wall, their boat ramp comes up and the wall meets to grade, and you know, conceivably you could build a higher wall, but right now the water would get around it.
Yeah.
We used to have huge ice chunks that, you know, the size of a quarter of this room that would float up and go into the backyard and come out, and you know, taking things out. We don't have that now. The winters aren't, get big slabs of ice as much.
Well, it looks to me like it's very well planned and thought out, so I mean, and necessary based on the pictures that you shared.
So I got a question about the wall itself. So there's no plans of raising the height at this point, but is it designed to be raised because as sea level rise continues, I see it behind my house. I'm seeing more often water surging over where it never used to go, or except during a storm. So, is it, if it becomes a regular tidal occurrence as opposed to just a storm occurrence, is that wall designed to add another layer?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I'm not an engineer, but I believe that that wall could be increased in height. And actually, we are increasing it in height above the existing wall, depending on where you are on the site. So it's going to be increased in height either 1.5 to 3.5 feet. So it's going to be higher than the existing wall. But it's not going to be high enough to keep out coastal storm,
Right.
surges.
Capstone could be taken off and then another layer put up on top of that. Conceivably.
Yeah, they'd probably have to beef it up behind, like in this area here. They'd probably have to maybe, I don't know, maybe add more stones here in the backland. They have to make sure it can carry the weight, that's all they'd have to do.
Is there mortar between the stones or is it loose, just a loose wall?
I believe it's a gravity wall that doesn't have mortar.
I think that's right.
Footing could. Not footing on it. Yeah. Then they could.
Any other questions from the board? Any comment from the public? Any questions from? Okay,
I can have one question, Sue. Just to, kind of building off what Mark just said here, the aesthetics of the stone wall itself, is it natural stone?
It is. It's the stone that's
Yeah,
over here.
let me go back to the photos.
Yep.
So it's gonna be stone like this, but it's
Yeah.
gonna look better because it'll be a little more organized. So it's a nice looking wall if it was in a state of good
It's a
repair.
natural stone, it's not concrete.
Yes.
No,
Granite, Cape Bay granite.
Just trying to put it back together safely.
any other questions?
I almost feel like asking you to make it taller for your own good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge is the water's still gonna get around behind.
Yeah.
We're not, trying to keep it out. We're just trying to make it safe and we're used to having the backyard, it just gets wet at spring tides and something we have.
they'd have to fill the whole backyard in to get it up to that grade. And then, like you said, there's 2 ramped areas on either side of the property.
So I was,
Oh,
sorry,
Peter.
yeah, I assume the Conservation Commission talked to you about, it's not the fill and all that you're using to raise the grade and all,
Yep.
yeah.
No, I
Yes.
just had one last question. This is from more of an engineering of the wall itself. Will it have drain ports through the wall itself? To allow water, if it does get behind, go back through the wall?
Well, that's why see how it's dry laid right now? You see, there's no mortar. So the water will go in.
Back through the gravel, it'll be a little bits of gravel, so stone will be put on top and leveled
So
with
you can use
gravel.
the gravel
So-
behind and go.
Yes.
below
Yes.
the wall
So
versus-
the water will can come
through the
in,
wall.
Right.
hit go through the gravel and then come back out.
I just wondered if drain port through the wall might be a little added benefit, take the pressure off the back of the wall. But
It was designed that way with this stone. So, if you were gonna mortar it, it would be a solid wall. You'd have to put PVC pipes or something in there to get the pressure out from the backland.
Right, and the tide comes up and then pretty quickly,
Okay.
on either side. It's not every tide, it's just the spring tides, really, king tides in the spring.
Any other questions? Okay, I guess I will take a motion to close the public hearing on this special permit.
I will move that.
Mr. Morton moved, second,
I'll second.
Chris seconds. Okay, any further discussion by the board? I'll just remind you that our standard is to determine that the adverse effects of the proposed use will not outweigh the beneficial impacts to the town and its neighborhood in view of the particular characteristics of the site and of the proposal in relation to the site. The consultant went through each of the criteria regarding the special permit considerations in her project description and in the letter. So in my opinion, I think we have the information. Is the sense that we're ready to vote?
Yeah.
And I have a motion to approve. I'll get it in front of me. The application for a special permit by Peter and Creighton regarding 6 Ashley Avenue for the proposed seawall improvement project, 6 Ashland Avenue, Manchester, Massachusetts, the existing conditions plan and section 1 drawing and proposed site plan section drawing 2. Do I have to put the dates in? Okay.
Second.
Ms. Barbara Turner moves, Mr. Morton seconds. We'll take a roll call vote. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Right, you have your special permit.
Thank you very much.
No, not yet. I have
Thank
to
you,
draft
Susan.
a special permit.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
I have to draft it.
Thanks, Susan.
Oh,
I
right.
have to draft a
Right, right,
special permit and
Right.
then we'll
okay.
probably a couple weeks.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
By the way,
Too
thank you
extensive,
thank
but
you for all the
it's short
explanation at
discussion.
each point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
That
really
was
helpful.
terrific. Appreciate you do this.
And as soon as it's done.
Oh, thank you.
file with the Town clerk.
Yep.
And then there's an appeal
All set.
period, 30 days, and then it can get recorded.
Right. So, good. You can
Great.
Watch it happening in the.
That's right.
All right.
Thanks again.
All
Thanks,
set?
Peter.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It was a lot easier than the soul.
Hear about driveway entrances in Okay, thank you, Sue. Now we're gonna talk about, Mark is gonna, lead us through, to refresh your memory at our, retreat. He said, in the short run, we're gonna try to tackle this driveway entrance problem. We're gonna talk about senior housing and we're gonna talk about, downtown. So it's premature to do downtown until we meet with Kathy. We're trying to set a time. We'll put senior housing next time.
Okay,
or-
I'll get out a memo to everybody.
Yeah, so, Mark was going to sort of, we thought we'd do a model of, what are the issues, and then Mark can go and write the regulations as a draft, and then come back to us.
So-
Rather than us trying to haggle our way through every line of the regulations.
Do drafting.
Yeah.
So, I did a little outline. Does everyone have it with them or?
No. It was on the.
Yeah, it was on, in
Bring it up on the
if you
screen.
didn't have it.
Did you?
No.
This thing?
Was it on SharePoint, just so I?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's where we're still, I sent directly.
Anytime.
And then if you want, I have the regulations and the bylaws here. One copy of that,
You have extra,
so.
right?
If I need the regulations, I have.
I think looks like this.
Yeah,
Okay.
I need them.
So basically, I just kind of took a quick skim through each of the bylaw and the regulations and just I did a quick outline of how it's set up and whether it really needs some adjustments, and then we can discuss what it would need. The first, so I did the bylaw first. That's what was approved by town meeting, which authorized you to adopt specific regulations. So the first is the purpose of intent, and that seems fine. I mean, I don't see any great reason to revise that. You just adopted this a few years ago. So I think it just needs a few tweaks, so to speak, to the bylaw. The next section was the applicability as what it applies to, and I think that's fine as well. The regulations.
Can I just stop on applicability
Sure.
to make sure we're all,
Mhm.
so just everybody, by way of background,
Mhm.
the review of driveway entrances used to rest with the planning board. So we went and saw every single curb cut. And we went and had a site walk for every single curb cut. And, Ron felt really strongly and that, well, a lot of times people didn't come to the sidewalks. They were poorly attended, I would say, right? You get two people sometimes. So, Ron felt very strongly that the engineers in the DPW were better able to assess the intersection of a driveway with the existing road, with the existing sidewalk, with the existing slopes and the existing safety and drainage. So we moved the driveway review.
Can I
general-
just add?
Yeah,
Manchester is the only town in eastern Massachusetts that has a planning board, had the planning board approving driveway.
okay, so there are lots of reasons. So we moved it to the general bylaws. And that is how it ended up there with the DPW. So in terms of applicability, it is that the applicability here requires a permit issued by the DPW. So the permit should be separate in addition to any required site plan review prior. And then the second piece of the applicability is if it doesn't meet certain criteria, then it comes to us. That's how it's current, but that, when Mark says applicability is okay, I think the important thing is, do we want to change to anybody other than the DPW and?
No.
Yeah, I feel like that horse left the barn a long time ago, but by way of, background
Who would we?
to us.
No.
That's why I said, okay, because I don't
Yeah,
think you really should be
Yeah,
doing that again.
Right, but I wanted to just,
Mhm.
that's not one of the things I think we need to change.
We're gonna Mike and Pen do it.
Yeah, you could toss it on to somebody else.
Whatever. Historic. Okay, sorry, go
Uh,
ahead.
Okay, so then the next is application requirements, and so, so there's, I put move to regulations on the outline because it actually has, certain requirements for a fee, it needs to be an engineered plan, and some additional requirements. But if we're adopting regulations, it may be more prudent to move these, I mean, we've already adopted regulations, to move some of these items into regulations. They can be adjusted or changed easier without having to go back to town meeting.
Can we back up for a second? Are you proposing we change the bylaw and the regulations?
Yes. It'll be a two-step process. Obviously, bylaw has to go to the town meeting. So, because, so some of these, in the regulations section of, that's fine. I'm looking at the wrong. Okay, that's good. So the, sorry. So there are specific things, oh, I was right, in the regulations that perhaps ought to get moved to the the other things, such as setbacks, one curb cut only, increased minimum width. I know the fire department, 8 feet is too narrow for their bigger trucks, so they want that, minimum changed, and then they have a driveway regulations of their own they kind of follow. So we call it a flare and have a design, have something stated here.
Mark, where are you, man?
So under section 46, which is the bylaw,
Oh,
yeah, so you want
Looking
to.
at the regulation.
This one.
okay.
Yeah, the single page.
Well, that's in-
Title
Uh,
46.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just summarizing this.
So I think some of those things ought to be reviewed and then moved over to the bylaw. So, I mean, to the regulations from the bylaw.
Can we maybe just walk through these one
Sure.
by one and see if there's,
Mhm.
kind of agreement that, these are, important, so I just sort of created a summary here. So these are the regulations shall be low, so I kind of broke it down as adding character terms, numbers. Located 20 feet from the nearest street intersection. So you're proposing that that be a regulation rather than a mandate in the bylaw?
Probably.
Yeah. Okay, with 10 feet from the nearest driveway entrance or fire hydrant. So I guess the argument is that DPW could use their professional judgment to determine those.
Yeah, based on, there may be a unique characteristic of a bylaw, I mean, of a
Site.
particular site that may need to be, different than what's here, and if it's a bylaw, they can't authorize a practical field adjustment as opposed to if it's a regulation and we add some language that allows them to do that, something like that.
Okay, so that we would basically move all these two regulations.
Mhm.
It seems to me that number 4, that I would agree with that on, 20 feet from the nearest street intersection, 10 feet from the nearest driveway, and 5 feet from side lot lines, trees, utility poles, street lights. Those seem to me that those could be in regulations, except with some sort of provision for specific site issues. Seems to me number 4, driveway entrances should be designed to maximize visibility in all direction and to minimize the flow of water on public streets, could remain in the bylaw.
Yes,
Yes.
that's like
It's
a
a
standard goal.
Right. And then number 5 was the one that's caused a fair amount of
Yeah.
consternation, which is there shall not be more than one apron or curb cut per residential plot. And, that, I know, we talked about that extensively, how did it come to be, right? And that was, the feeling that we were going to reduce impervious surfaces, minimize impervious surfaces. But, I think we've seen a couple of places where that's, and there's no provision in the current general bylaw for the exception. Which is the one that has come before us was School Street, and there was a determination from DPW that the second entrance was there historically. When you looked at Google Earth, and that was the resolution on that second. When they finished it off, DPW said, I can see that they've been going in and out of there historically, so it already existed.
Look at the draw.
So I want to channel Laura Tenney
Yes.
here and say that a lot of this has to do with pedestrian safety. The 8-foot width, for example, and no backing out, that kind of thing is all for pedestrian safety for people walking across the sidewalk or on street and getting hit by a car coming out.
Yeah.
So we just need to keep that in mind. I think.
Yeah.
But allowing a loop driveway where there's enough room, to construct one helps reduce those conflicts.
It's possible, yes, it's a trade-off.
Well, on
Because
a
you-
a street like School Street, I think it does. You know, it's a really well-traveled street.
So I think we could make a goal statement that it is that it should be number 4, maximize visibility, and then what is six?
You could say,
Um,
you know, something
So,
limiting.
or that maintain accessible, bigger. Something that to avoid reduction of on-street parking. You know, some of the goals of the driveway review should be to avoid reduction of on-street parking. And maintain accessible cross slopes on public sideways and minimize vehicle pedestrian contact. So we leave them as goal statements, then the regulations can implement those and. I mean, certainly DPW is gonna be cognizant of reducing on-street parking. One would think.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, who knows?
Right. One other background is that on the sidewalks in the past, which now don't exist, neighbors would come and
Complain.
express their opinions about the proposed driveway.
Explain.
And so another part of the discussion was there was significant feeling that neighbors should have input onto the driveway entrance of their neighbors. So,
Many others thought that was a bad idea.
right,
Yeah.
there was certainly some opinion expressed on that. So that's how we came to all of this. Okay, so I think we could make it as a goal statement, the things that the DPW should consider. And that kind of, if somebody wants to complain about it, then it gives them specific goals. Well, we're taking away on-street parking, we're giving pedestrian contract, you know, that kind of thing.
So would DPW being the ultimate arbiter?
I think planning, I think
So
one of the
it-
questions is what's the
right.
appeals process?
Right.
Numbers for what, Peter, whether we have 1 or 2,
No, I mean, they're the ones who are determining whether these
Yes.
the goals are
Feedback.
met, yeah.
Well, I think we would have regulations.
Yeah.
That would actually say, you know, the fire department's requirements and our requirements. But then when you have regulations, we don't have to go to town meeting to change that. So let's say we make it exactly what they are to now. We decide, oh, instead of being a maximum of 12 feet, it can be a maximum of 12.5 feet. We can have a public hearing and we can change it. So there's a lot of advantages procedurally.
Right, that makes sense.
So for example, the next sentence that begins the driveway width as
Yeah.
it approaches blah, blah, will go to
Driveway
regulations. Great.
And how does DPW feel about us going through this process? Are they happy
So-
that we're doing this?
I think the fire department and public works are happy that there'll be more clarity to the regulations and so, you know, this has been, you adopted, my first meeting here. You adopted the regulations, so I had no input and the bylaw had already been passed. So now it's been a year and a half, this has been in place. They've identified some procedural things that ought to get adjusted, some construction or design elements that ought to get changed. So I think they're both pleased that we're addressing this and I have a meeting scheduled tomorrow with them to kind of go through this so that I can then draft the changes.
Okay. So it seems to me that the next one is about the minimum width and the maximum width. Flare, those are regulations, and then. Then the last piece there is if a sidewalk or roadway is constructed, it should be done in accordance with ADA and DPW standards. That's a goal. So we create the goals in the bylaw, the authority to DPW. And then, and this seems to me to make a lot of sense.
As-
Just,
No, go
I
ahead.
just have a question here on just kind of, would there be like a user guide as an outcome to this of how, you know, the flow would go from bylaw to regulation to DPW that would be clearly explained to the general public?
So the regulations, do have in here kind of the procedural part
Mhm.
of applying for, through Public Works and what needs to be done in order to do so. And then, but some of the procedural things such as you have to go through that process in order to apply for a special permit, but if you already know you need to apply for a special permit, you shouldn't have to do that. So, so that's like one of the procedural things that needs to get changed.
There is an application to the DTW and it does, I believe, say that if you can't do these things, then you have to come to the planning board, so. But I think the change that Mark's proposing is really to take it entirely out of our hands.
Excellent idea.
Yeah, I think that is a great idea.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
I guess the only thing is enforcement would be by DPW and the building inspector, but if people feel aggrieved, they maybe have a period that they could come and have us hear it.
Yeah, yeah. and
There's
with-
no appeal
There is
period. There's
an
no
appeal to the
There's no-
planning.
yeah.
You know, if there's a butter of, you know,
yeah.
problem is that the feeling is the butters don't know. That's one of the, you know, if you go to DPW and you get your driveway permit, then you start construction and I don't like it, or I feel that it's doesn't meet these goals, then where do I go as a neighbor? And the answer might be it's private land.
Yeah.
Sort of like any building going up
Right.
next door or any landscaping happening next door.
I guess the flip is the other thing is if the DPW says you must make it this, that, or the other thing, and the applicant doesn't like it, they could come to us.
Yeah, so it could be two ways. One is we still will have very specific standards in the regulations. And if an applicant can't meet those, maybe they come to the planning board, sort of like it's set up for the special permit. But you could do the opposite, whereas if the applicant you know, is denied, they could come as well, so.
Well, right now it says any curb cuts that do not comply with the criteria defined, could say in the regulation,
Mhm.
or in the opinion of the DPW should require a special review, may be permitted if special permit is granted by the company.
I just wondered whether it should be a special permit, because
That's pretty,
High bar.
that's a pretty, well, it's all these criteria you have to meet now. You know, community standards and lighting and. So I wonder if it could just be appealed to the planning board.
Right, should be reviewed by the planning board, not as a
for
special
for
permit.
an administrative review.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
So the pushback is gonna be, because we went through this before,
Mhm.
I'm kind of tired of the argument. The pushback is going to be that when it's regulations, then the town meeting won't have any say over it. And if you don't trust town government, it's going to, I don't know, wreak havoc with the driveway regulations and allow anything to happen. And the public won't have any input. Because we just approve regulations ourselves. So if we take this.
But we have to have a public hearing.
Sure,
There is
public
public
hearing.
input.
Yeah, but it's not like town meeting where people vote on it. So that's what might happen when you bring this to town meetings. Some of those naysayers are gonna raise this as a
It's a
problem.
50% vote to change the general bylaw.
Luckily, yes. So
I think-
that's just a heads up. I'm not suggesting we do anything, but
I personally think we move forward with it, and we've heard enough complaints about its current problems that.
And one other thing I'll say is, if we designed everything to meet the approval of the fire department, this place would look like North Shore Mall, so we gotta be a little careful of giving them free rein to say
Yeah,
they
I
want
do
10
have
foot
that, I
wide
do have a
driveways.
concern that their regulations are.
It's, I didn't put them in the folder.
Nice.
I did.
And aren't a lot of the fire department rules for driveways, not curb cuts?
Yeah, a lot of it's for the driveway, not just the curb cut, but they have a few things, like the radius at the street
Yeah,
and the width would apply as well. So the width is wider. Maybe by 2 feet instead of 8, it's 10. And we call it a flare, and in our little regulations, they use a radius. So we have to,
well, it's a flare if there's not a curb, if there's a curb, we get a radius, right?
well, yeah, it's kind of the same.
Yeah,
We'll just make it so it's consistent. Yes.
So it seems like, the next steps, are there other specifics?
So that's,
I have one question. I don't, if you could clarify for me. In C, the sentence, there shall not be more than one apron and curb cut per residential lot. Did that remain in the bylaw or did it move to the regulation?
it has to be taken out of the bylaw.
I think I just.
yeah, we'll move that to the Bible,
To the, I'm sorry,
to the regulation.
to the regulation.
Yeah, and we'll add some sort of allowances to permit it. For DPW to permit a loop driveway or a driveway off of 2 streets, let's say you're on a corner or something like that, but under certain conditions on for certain
Yeah, we
things.
certainly don't want to encourage them.
Yes.
So one of the hazards of SharePoint is I'm actually editing the stuff that was in the meeting packets. I apologize to that. I just was trying to use it to showcase what we. So it's a little easier for people to see what's in them. I just need to touch that. Okay, so I also think if we propose something, when we have a hearing, well, actually, we present this to the select board, and we probably want to have it be part of the regular hearing. If we have the draft regulations that we would expect to be adopting ready.
Yeah.
Then it helps people to have some comfort.
Yep.
So do you feel like you have enough to make a draft that we can look at?
Well, I think between, after I meet with Public Works and the Fire Department tomorrow, because I'll really need their input and some of the more specific design things. So that it's kind of consistent, as well as the procedural aspects of the regulations. Specific application requirements, steps you have to go through, and they may want to change some of that. So I think as they go through it with them tomorrow, I should be able to put a draft together.
Okay. Any other comments on the draft list?
Exciting.
Yes.
All right.
If you'd have done some of those walks, you would be excited.
Okay, great. The next item on our agenda is, at our last meeting, we talked a little bit about how liaisons to other boards, and I passed out, with a typo at the top, sorry. I didn't mean, when I discovered the typo, I don't.
Here somewhere, like, stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have in the past had, liaisons to many boards, longer list than this, but I think these are the most important ones for us to liaison with, and as I suggested before, what I thought we would do is create a rotating, maybe 2 people two of these committees are reported out at each meeting with a brief 3-minute, 2-minute, you know, summary. So, and I don't think that there is not an expectation that you go to everybody's meetings, but that you touch base with the chair, or you read the minutes, or you know, give a summary of what is going on at this point. So, that's as opposed to what we have done in the past, saying liaison reports and everybody goes, not really. Or maybe one person, we always have something from the Affordable Housing Trust, but, but anyway, so that way you're off the hook for most of the time, but then can, you know. So this, the other actually two things, is the DPW, which is actually the Facilities Committee, kind of overlaps with the Facilities Committee perhaps, but maybe not.
So
DPW.
that's supposed to happen
Yeah.
sometime this month. I
Yeah.
talked to Nate Chuck.
Yeah.
And he said they're gonna get a meeting together this month.
Okay, so I wrote down who's currently working on some of these and what else people, or anybody have a particular, other, interests in, any of these in particular that people wanna take on?
I would be happy to work on the open space and recreation, because I was part of a long ago effort to
Yes.
find more fields. One of the many.
Okay.
iterations.
And I wouldn't mind either the historic or conservation,
Okay,
whichever.
great.
And I just, Gordon, when we were talking about the facilities committee, you
Yeah.
suggested that I join you. Is that still gonna be the case? Oh,
Okay.
good. Okay. All right.
Right.
Yeah, that's fine. No, I was I was curious. Yeah,
However, it's worthwhile.
I know.
what's going on.
yeah,
I think that's a
So,
pretty big,
yes,
yeah.
planning.
come on now.
Keep me in the loop.
Sarah, is there
Okay.
a reason
Well, I
that
know
Parks and
opportunity.
Rec isn't on this?
It's supposed to be sometime
No.
the next 2 weeks, I guess.
See, they're advertising for it in the cricket.
We're gonna add 2 more, Parks and Rec. And the other one, actually I sat in today is, it's a regional, planning effort on, the electric grid capacity. So, I sat in on that and I'm interested in.
For fun?
Uh-huh.
Seriously, but that's.
That's,
Yeah.
that's
Parks and Rec really
Kind of open
need
space.
open space and recreation, I mean.
they're all,
No,
Yeah,
yeah,
it is really the same.
but they're two separate committees.
There are
that-
two
Two separate
separate.
committees.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not.
They should probably be combined.
Yeah, but that's.
Yeah,
the
well,
same-
there you go.
Well, the Parks and Rec oversees the Parks
Parks and Rec.
Department, and Open Space and Recreation is Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee, so when it's time to review the plan, I think that
It seemed
spends a lot
rare.
more,
Mhm.
they spend more time really on open space related.
Yeah.
Some trail stuff.
Well, I'm willing to do anything. I did zoning board of appeals and I'm not sure
That we really,
that we really need someone there. But
that's,
whatever we think we need to for
well,
them.
why don't we hold on that one? Then we've got Chris is doing Affordable Housing Trust, and Brian, I think you're interested in sort of
Yep.
learning more about that one too.
Yep.
And CPC is Chris. We need somebody to do historic.
I'll do that.
That would be great. Okay, kind
And who's the chair of that?
of, that's,
Rosemary
Rosemary,
Capella.
okay. Okay, that looks like we've got everybody filled in for the moment.
Move to a conservation?
Well, I put you and Mark, but
great,
Mark
okay.
sits on conservate.
Good.
He served,
Perfect.
right, so the two of you can. I do think it's good for a committee member to be up to speed on what's going on these committees.
Yep.
So, that looks like a pretty good distribution, and I'm gonna just put ZBA for Sue, just kind of keeping an eye on what's going on.
Okay,
Read their minutes and,
okay, we'll do that.
I mean, I think so if we think of it as a report out and you're doing ZBA, you might say, here are the things that they hear most often, or, kind of a little bit more background on what their committee does too,
Okay.
you know? So,
Yeah.
this can be a living list. We'll put it on the,
So I have a very oblique suggestion,
yes.
as I am prone to doing. it.
Why doesn't it have to be oblique?
Because,
Perfect.
yeah, everybody knows Essex is building a new school or designing a new school in here. One of the options is building in Manchester.
What?
Oh, my God.
Two is a possibility, very remote, but do we get involved with that?
Yeah.
Where at Sweeney Park?
No, it's actually would be on the site of the school we just finished 3 years ago. I know this because I'm on the building committee for that, and we just went through our architect selection this morning. So it's starting to happen here, but it's like a big nothing right now, because the architect got to go through the thing. Couple of the suggestions they came up with on their options that they submitted for their proposals.
You can
Joe,
change the regional
actually,
agreement
a
to do that.
reasonable plan of how it could be done. And how,
I think we don't have to worry about it right now. You're representing, you'll keep us updated
I'm
and,
representing you guys,
but it's the regional you have to, I mean, the regional agreement says you have to have it in Essex.
yeah, it's you have to have what?
You have to have the elementary schools in each town.
Yeah.
So it's bigger. I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't,
I just
Let's
want
keep us
to
posted.
make people alert, so we don't get feverishly and say, this is the one. And in fact, maybe it can't be done at all. So there's
Okay.
more, it's more than just us figuring out the ed plan and how that all works out. It's pretty
read the
interesting,
regional agreement.
interesting plan, so.
Oh, my gosh. What a
Is it on top
disaster.
of Memorial?
What
Is
a
that what they're thinking
political
of doing?
disaster.
The additional building on site.
Hey,
Well, anyway.
They could wipe out the tennis courts.
Oh God, help me.
there you go.
The tennis courts are salvaged and these very, very, throw it out there for the proposal plans, but they were well thought through. Okay. So, no more said.
Anything you want.
Just in case.
I think at this point, the tennis court's like this in distant
You're
memory.
never
Just
gonna let those tennis courts go.
anyway. Okay, so that's liaisons. Thank you. I will give a quick update on the harbor management committee, just so sort of while without having thought about it too much. So the harbor management plan, as I've said before, it's a discrete task. As opposed to, but then there's the Harbor Advisory Committee, which is an ongoing committee. So I see harbor as Harbor Advisory plus the task of the Harbor Management Plan. Harbor Management Plan is being done by Urban Harbors Institute, which is a outfit out of UMass Boston. We have a grant to have them develop the plan. We had a public input session a while ago, last fall. We got a bunch of input, did a bunch of interviews. You know, this process is very similar across these planning processes. And the consultants have broken down the input that they've gotten from a whole bunch of processes to 4 goals, which are something about protecting around climate and flooding. It's kind of a intersection with hazardous mitigation and climate vulnerability action plan. And one of the questions we have is like, why do we need to say this again? Like, why can't we just refer to those other plans? But anyway, safety, water quality, natural resources, and our committee has added the marine economy
Yeah,
as a 5th one.
yeah, that's.
I think right now, I would say that's sort of the structure that has been proposed with issues and recommendations. We're at the stage of trying to call out some of the minor recommendations that somebody could do, seems like could do tomorrow, like install a fish cutting station, which could be done, like somebody could just go do one, sort of easy, compared to, you know, the large question of is our harbor at capacity? That's the big question.
Well, who can install a fish cutting
So
station?
at one of the public docks.
Oh, okay.
All right, yeah.
Not like you.
Sorry,
But-
did you say you're determining whether the harbor?
Well, that's one of the things that we want to determine, and it's a little, and that capacity is around numbers of boats, peak use, emergency preparedness, staffing, traffic, those kinds of things, and it's a question that doesn't have a good answer. So our committee has been wrestling with these obvious goals of water quality, climate, safety. You know, you don't want to say have an unsafe harbor, obviously. You know, it's like, and the harbor is a bigger, it's like the coastal area. And we keep talking about the inner heart, the heart, what we think of as the harbor. So I think we are struggling to create a different level of goal that is more sort of aspirational and then can inform things. And this is like the harbor is a treasure and must be protected. It is a defining feature. The coastal waterways in the harbor is a defining feature of Manchester and must be treated as treasure, something like that. That's a little bit more, and then that gets into public access, into views, into capacity, into water quality, into safety, and those kinds of things which flow on that. So we're struggling because the plan is very, like all these other plans, very obvious goals with some obvious recommendations. And we're struggling to reconcile that. The other thing that we've kind of arrived at are two big things. One is this question of how do we determine capacity? Because it's in terms of the harbor itself, because it is finite. And the other thing that we've sort of think, what?
It's fluid. I
It-
mean,
It's finite and it's fluid, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
That's
about,
pun about the liquid.
no.
but it's like parking, it's peak, you know, you have the peak summer day where you have everybody's coming and
Right.
going. We have a number of historic changes in how the harbor is used. So historically, if you went to the Rotunda exhibit, the harbor was populated with sailing boats, and now it's day boats with large engines, as opposed to boats that go out and leave their mooring and maybe go out for a week and then come back. You have boats that come and go all day long, you know, so it's the other thing is it's a very different level of, we have, more people using it. We have more hand boats, like, you know, the kayaks and the paddle boards and those kinds of things. And the barrier to entry in terms of knowledge is actually lower than it historically was, which is also mean it's a more access. So that's a good thing about it. The other thing that we've kind of arrived at in terms of the harbor itself is that we have a lot of public access to the harbor. You know, you could argue never enough or whatever, but compared to other places, we have a number of places to launch hand boats. We have, you know, the docks, we have kayak racks, boat launching facilities. And then the last thing that's particularly relevant to the planning board is the possibility of a sort of a harbor overlay district. And what would that do? Two things. A harbor overlay district might create a harbor enterprise zone so that to try to encourage continued marine uses where the boatyards are, as opposed to boatyards across the country are being converted to marinas with condos, which is something that we might want or might not.
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing, which other things. So
Houseboats.
houseboats.
Yeah.
We didn't even get into houseboats, but that is actually something to think about. Another issue is an overlay zone could have restrictions on fertilizer use or impervious surface percentages could be raised. So, I mean, lowered. lower impervious.
Lower, yes.
So those are among the things that are being relevant to us. So we're really wrestling with how to make it actionable, prioritize.
What's the general sense are? Do you feel that, does your group feel that the harbor is maxed out already?
I think there's a lot of evidence that we're approaching capacity. Boats bump into each other. You know, when on a peak day, the traffic is
And
quite
now we're
heavy.
Expanding the docks too.
Yeah, so there's it's really a lot of change of use in the last 20 years in terms of
Yeah.
the types of boats and visiting boats have from other harbors are coming. The other thing is that we've determined that we really can't only deal with Sand Dollar Cove on an enforcement basis. Can't prohibit people from coming or reduce the number of people who come on a hot summer day.
Wow.
So, but you know, Sand Dollar Cove means that it's almost impossible to hold small boat racing on that hottest summer day inside of Misery. So there's a lot of changes that you kind of just have to, you know, accept or understand. But it's an evidence that, you know, hand boats, small boats on the peak summer day are can be challenging safety. So
Can I,
Big questions.
yeah,
Those are
those,
good questions.
curious, that just made me think about when Brian was in here for quite a few consecutive meetings, and he was talking about one thing was the benefit of adding public dock space to the revenue for the town. Do we ever get updates as to a pacing of what that revenue is looking like this year compared to last year, just to back up that, you know, the case that he made as to
Yeah,
why we
yeah.
should support it?
I mean, the harbor committee has only heard the same kind of thing. I know the FinCom is looking at that.
Oh, good. So someone is, yeah. Okay.
FinCom is
Okay.
wondering about that and, so.
And then some other things too, like when the Tux Point Rotunda, and maybe I should have known this, I probably should have known this, but that the grant that was presented to us when we were approving that fell through. Then suddenly it's at town hall and we're voting whether to appropriate that money. Was that something that we were made aware of when the grant fell through? Not that it would make any, but
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
think-
talking about communication. It would just be nice to know that.
Yeah, I think it was in I
Like
think we should all
how-
be reading the town.
How to administer, yeah, and I
you know,
try and do
that's-
that, but I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's my opinion that it shouldn't matter for our special permit, where the money's coming from. That's sort of a.
Oh, I know, I know, but it's just a
Yeah.
big case for support was that it was gonna be funded by external.
Right,
And then the other thing is the status of the Central Street culvert. And whether that, I know there was some internal discussions going on about that.
I think,
Yeah, so they have refiled with the Conservation Commission, so their original permits had expired.
Right.
So they needed to,
Extend
and they
it,
have
yeah.
refiled and can't remember, this last hearing meeting was approved or it was continued one more meeting, so.
Is that something that we need to,
I don't think we have to do anything
Right.
as a board, but I just asked Nate about it, and I think it's still, has some hoops to go through.
and I think my general line of questioning here is that, is it our personal responsibility to follow up on these things, to find out the status of them? Is there, kind of like the enforcement question we had, right? I mean, a lot of things come before us and then I lose track of them.
Right,
I just
exactly.
wonder how you
I
would
know.
be able to stay
Well, I'm
abreast.
hoping that the liaisons will do that to some extent, and as we have issues that we think we should be paying attention to, Mark, follow up on them.
Track them. Yeah.
Maybe we should, have, the town administrator come from time to time to sort of give us an update or,
Right.
But, you're right, and I think Mary made this point actually, and I agree with her that, for the planning board, so much of our work is zoning and division of land, but we can take a larger, a look at some of the planning questions about where things should go but the coordinate, I mean, so much going on, right?
Yeah.
You know, just think about what Nate, the two things Nate proposed there, that's like just a drop in the bucket, plus Central Street Jam and the Rotunda, like. Just keeping abreast of all of those and then the facilities plan. I mean, I think it would be good for us to see the facilities plan at some point. And maybe next time Nate's coming here for something else, we can ask for something of that or something.
And also this
Well,
South
they
signaling
have-
update, where are they?
Yeah, so that was another question I had for you. I asked you if you could, if you knew where they were on their project and if if all the conditions of their special permit have been met yet. Can you follow up on that by next meeting?
For which projects are you talking?
It's all signaling. So they were gonna,
I would love to be involved in it just to see
Yeah,
what's
I would.
going on.
Yeah,
yeah, we're, it'd be good to go up and do a site walk to make sure that things are stabilized. That do they have the construction website? I talked to Greg before he retired and he said that the agreements for the $1.3 million for the Ashland Ave improvements had been nailed down, as well as the $250,000.
nailed down, meaning signed and.
Yeah, signed and in
Great.
hands, so.
Great.
And then we had $250,000, this is from my memory, but, for, a performance guarantee for the site stabilization and the stormwater. So it's possible that they could be asking for a release of some of that, depending where they are on the project.
I think,
I hear them work every day.
Yeah. Here it is, yeah.
So, the next meeting, let's get an update on where they are and also particularly where they are on, if there's any outstanding issues on their special permit that need to be.
I'll be happy to help you with that, Mark, if you
Yeah,
need to, just
site
to,
walk.
just to go see it, 'cause then, by the way,
Yeah.
Atwater Avenue is deteriorating very fast. Very fast. Matter
Well,
of fact, I actually go all the way around the lanes to avoid all of this stuff at the
Well.
beginning of the road, it's getting worse.
Yeah.
so that we got $1.3 million for the town to, after construction, to
Yeah.
upgrade the road and put in a pedestrian access along
That's
the
the
road.
way.
So it's deteriorating, you think, because of the construction vehicles?
Yeah.
Is it what?
You think it's deteriorating due to the construction
Oh, yes,
vehicles?
definitely,
Yeah.
because there's so much traffic goes to the MAC anyway, and then all the construction traffic goes down that road, it's bad,
Yeah.
getting worse or. Worse. all the time.
More worse?
I think we got enough protections in there with the monies in, I think Chuck has said he's gonna rebuild the road with monies provided by them to allow us to do that at such time.
Yeah.
Because the DPW is putting their building up there too, and they're coming down, I forget the name of that road, something.
Glass Road.
Yeah, they'll be right down onto it, so the timing of it is good, the whole thing is well thought through. I think we're in good shape.
Would
So,
it make sense to invite our town administrator to a meeting of the planning board to just have a,
just get to know.
get to know?
Yeah.
them?
I just met
Good
him
idea.
on the way up here. This guy. Said he wasn't coming tonight because he had heard that the agenda was light. And he didn't want to deal with the driveway regulations.
All right,
so the public document, Peter asked about the income, but has there been any sort of analysis or discussion about what the secondary impact of all those voters coming, not just paying the fee, but they're spending in town? Where are they spend? Are they going to the liquor store? Are they going to Dunks? Are they shopping for supplies at Crosby's?
anecdotal,
Are they having lunch at lunch places? You know?
anecdotal. So yeah, DACWA
I
is
think that would
is
be
an app that
important.
gives us the numbers, and I spoke with, the DACWA actually was invented by a guy in Manchester, and he could give us the numbers, so I haven't followed up with him, but he also said he could look at trends at other towns and other public facilities to give us some sort of information about how other small towns how much capacity they are providing to the public. Because,
That would be
so,
great.
yeah, so this is, unfortunately, Urban Harbors is finding us difficult to work with because we keep asking them for more than the.
Yeah.
Well, they're not giving they're not giving us professional input, they're simply just kind of collating stuff and we keep asking them, what about this and what about that and, but, you know, it's a fairly good sized contract, so. All right, is there any public comment? Great. Do we have any minutes? No, okay, so we're gonna get those. Any other business? Correspondence, there was one from Lorraine, Iavoni, and, I will send it to, it looks like it came to, didn't go to Sandy and. Right, I'll send it to you guys.
We're still in.
So, it went to everybody else, so.
I got it.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Take a motion to adjourn.
So.
Second,
Second,
favor?
I.
Did it all.
no.
Very enthusiastic second.